Somewhere Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 50, Chapter 8, Older. On July 17th, Shouta and Hizashi were working together on a stakeout mission, when Hizashi turned 22 years old. Shouta hadn't noticed that it was midnight, and hadn't been paying attention at the time at all, if he was being honest, too focused on the task at hand. They were watching out for a serial killer, something that would normally be in the police's jurisdiction, but due to the amount of people the murderer had killed already, and how they used their quirks for crimes, the case had been passed on to the nearest pro heroes available, Eraserhead and President Mike. They had been hulking down on the roof of an old paper mill, keeping an eye on the apartment across the street. When the clock struck midnight, Shouta had been on his stomach on the roof, using binoculars to keep a close eye on who they suspected would be the killer's next victim, while Hizashi kept an eye on the entrance to the building and the windows surrounding the victim's apartment. The killer's motives were unclear, but the way in which they picked their victims was rather obvious. A letter sent 7 days before he struck. The context of each letter the 16 victims had received were all different, but one thing had always been clear. The killer had no intent of showing mercy. Most of the victims had shrugged it off as a prank done by someone with nothing better to do, and had left it at that. This woman, on the other hand, had called the police as soon as she received her letter, and had created the opening they needed to catch the murderer. So now, they were there, sitting on the roof of an aging building, wanting to apprehend a dangerous, and very obviously malice, judging by the state of the victims, killer. Hizashi had hummed, the sound far too loud in the quiet of the night, and Shouta was sure that, had he been anyone else, and had he not received the training he had, he would have startled hard enough to fall off the roof. "It's my birthday," Hizashi noted, and Shouta could tell, even without looking up from the binoculars, that Hizashi was grinning. "I am officially," he said with conviction, "1 year older than you, and the same age as Nemuri again, thank God. She can't hold it over my head anymore." Shouta just hummed, shifting a bit in place so he could see the apartment building at a better angle. "I," Hizashi stated, "am an adult." "You've been an adult for 4 years, Sashi," Shouta muttered, squinting at the apartment window. Was that? No, it was just a shadow of the couch. Shouta sighed heavily. It was going to be a long night. "I'm an adultier adult," Hizashi said. Even though he was being quiet, he still sounded far too loud compared to the quiet night around them. The only noise, before Hizashi had begun talking, was the sound of the conventional car driving up and down the road, and the dull buzzing coming from the heat of the city. "I remember when I turned 18, Hizashi noted. "Ma cried. So did Dad." "You did too," Shouta noted. "That shadow, was that, damn it, ceiling fan." "Well, yeah," Hizashi admitted. Shouta could still remember that day like it was yesterday. Hizashi calling him in a panic in the middle of the night because he hadn't been sure if he was ready to move out of his house. Shouta spending a good 2 hours going around in circles with him, trying to reassure him that no, the world would not end if he moved out, and no, there was no rule saying he had to move out right then, and no one would judge him if he wanted to live with his parents a little while longer. The conversation had made Shouta think about moving out of his own apartment. It had been rather small, the memories that had come with it were depressing, and had seemed to fall into worse levels of despair every day. And the next day, Hizashi and Nemuri had helped him pick out a new one. Hizashi had moved in with him that November, after Shouta had turned 18. Hizashi snorted. "I remember after I turned 18, I started crying because I was scared to kiss you." "Because you didn't know whether it would be illegal or not," Shouta finished with a quiet laugh. "What I would give to be 18 again," Hizashi said wistfully. "When my only problems were whether or not I was allowed to kiss my boyfriend." It sounded ridiculous. The way Hizashi had said it, and Shouta had to stop himself from laughing again, because they were on a stakeout mission to catch a serial killer. Now was not the time to be laughing. But when he thought about it, it did sound completely and utterly absurd. The idea that that had been their biggest problem at one point. Not debt, not a traumatized 5-year-old, not doctor's appointments or surgeries or chronic pain or insurance or medicine. Something as simple and non-consequential as not being sure if you're legally allowed to kiss your boyfriend. It was mind-boggling how stupid it sounded when he thought about it. But, ashamed as he was to admit it, he would probably give anything just for one more day, one more moment of his life being so simple and easy and black and white. And he couldn't help but feel guilty for thinking that way. 22. Hizashi said softly, like he was testing out the word, seeing how it felt. Shouta nodded. 22. He echoed. Shouta set his binoculars, leaning to the side so he could check his time on the watch. 12:30. No one was quite sure the exact time the murders took place, but their best estimate was somewhere around 12 a.m. and 2 a.m. The killer could show up in the next 5 minutes, or not appear for another 2 hours. There was no way of telling. Hizashi hated stakeout missions with a passion, but no one could loathe them more than Shouta did himself. Hizashi hated them because he had to sit still for a long time, had to be quiet and serious, and focus all his attention on the task at hand. Hizashi got so distracted so easily, it was practically torture for him. Shouta hated stakeout missions because of the wait, the suspense, not knowing when targets could get striked, and the repercussions, the fear that he wouldn't be ready when it happened. When Shouta was on patrol, there was always that buzz in his skin, that adrenaline flowing through his veins, and it never stopped. It made him a better hero. It helped him take harder punches and kicks that would have incapacitated him otherwise, and make jumps from rooftop to rooftop less painful on his knee. But it didn't help him sit still for long periods of time. Not at all. Review the mission with me again, Shouta said, going back to looking through the binoculars. Listening to something. Debriefing, that would help. Okay, Hizashi said, and there was a bit of a shuffling. Shouta glanced to the side and saw Hizashi laying on his stomach next to him, staring intently at the building and the area surrounding it. The killer is malicious. They've perfected the way they do things. His voice was serious and even, the way it always was when he talked about the more unpleasant aspects of their jobs. The happy, exturbulent present mic persona was for the media, for the terrified victims. Not for this. Never for this. Statistically speaking, the killer is more likely a male, intelligent, physically capable, late 20s, early 30s. Victimology? Shouta asked, peering back into the apartment window. No new shadows. The victim was in her bed, more than likely pretending to be asleep, for the sake of the entire operation. A lot of the mission rested on her, and how well she played the part. 16 women, Hizashi answered, listing off all the relative facts of the case. All in their early 20s, different physical appearances, different backgrounds, different careers, so there's no real link there, but has to be something. Shouta hummed in agreement. All the cause of death were asphyxiation, but there weren't any signs of strangulation, nothing in their throats when the coroners checked, no obvious damage to the lungs, no fluids, powders, anything like that. Quirk use was evident, and they classify him as a villain and gave him to us. Asphyxiation. No powder in the lungs, no fluid, so it couldn't be drowning, couldn't be anything the woman inhaled. No bruising around the neck, or anywhere really. No defense wounds. Not even the ones that, as their families had put it, were fighters. They were missing something. Quirk use was obvious. Something to do with the lungs, but there was no damage in the lungs. No damage to the brain either. besides the obvious signs of oxygen deficiency, which was how they came to the conclusion that the cause of death was a fixation. Shouta knew basic information about psychology. He had to, with the job he had. Had to know how to react to some victims, to some villains. It was basically a requirement. Asphyxiation, choking, suffocation, that was a power play. And whoever this was had to be powerful. If there weren't any defensive wounds, no signs of struggle. The killer obviously knew what they were doing, because of the fast escalation and the way that every murder, as far as any of them knew, had been a success. That meant either he was really powerful, so powerful that they should really have backup, or the killer had prepared for every possible possibility. Anything that could go wrong, which was, quite honestly, just as upsetting. He might get cocky, mess up, but what were the chances of that happening? We're missing something, Shouta stated. Yeah, Hizashi agreed. What are we missing? Let's go over this again, Hizashi said. Asphyxiation, nothing in the lungs, no bruising, no signs of struggle. Their bodies were found in their beds. They didn't fight. He might have killed them in their sleep? Would you wake up? Shouta asked rhetorically, shifting in place slightly, when his elbow started aching. It was approaching 1 a.m. 1 hour. If someone was choking me, probably. But they weren't choking, Shouta argued, beginning to feel frustrated. They were supposed to have had more time to talk to the police and figure out a motive, a quirk, anything. But with the letters being reported so soon after the last victim, they simply hadn't had the time. No bruising of the throat, nothing in the throat, no damage to the lungs, nothing in the lungs. Something wasn't adding up. That had been made apparent the moment they stepped onto the roof. Shouta felt like tearing at his hair. Brain damage, but that's just because of the lack of... Hizashi froze. Oh. What? Shouta asked, settling down his binoculars for a moment and pushing his bangs out of his eyes. He needed a haircut soon. He was already dreading it. They're instantly dying, Sho. When he uses his quirk, they die instantly. Either that, or really, really quickly, Hizashi mumbled, leaning forward and snatching the binoculars from around Shota's neck. His quirk is sucking the oxygen from their blood. They're dying instantly, Shouta stated, mind buzzing. And because they can't fight. He might already be in that damn room and we never... Shouta cursed, feeling so unbelievably stupid, and he stood up, grabbing the end of his capture weapon as he did. We need to get her out of there. We never should have... He saw movement through the window. Call for backup, he said, and he saw Hizashi press a button on the band on his wrist. He jumped down from the building onto the pavement, bending his knees to brace the fall. He ran into the apartment, Hizashi close behind, taking the stairs 3 at a time before... There. He tried the door. Locked. He couldn't risk breaking it down. Not if the quirk could kill her instantly. But he couldn't just wait. But if it startled him, then maybe... There was an electric charge, tingling in the way from his head to the very tips of his fingers, and his heart was a tattoo needle in his chest, and he had no idea what to do. He kicked down the door with one thought in mind. I'm not paid enough for this. Stakeout mission. Woo woo. Also, I love the whole, like, I'm 18 now. Can I legally kiss you? My boyfriend. Like, I'm 18. You're a minor. Is that illegal? I remember when I was dating this one person, and they were older than me by like 3 months. And when they turned 18, I remember I always joked. And not even always joked. Our relationship didn't last till they turned 18, right? But I very much was so excited for when they turned 18 because we were dating, and Look, I thought it was gonna be forever. We were already in like a 1 year long situation. No, it's not situationship. It's more than a situationship, but not a relationship, but not just friends, but not just like best friends. We're more than friends, but less than a relationship, but more than a situationship. But as I was saying, look, it's complicated. We were complicated. Um we were doing that thing for a long time and we were kind of exclusive. At least I was treating it exclusively. And from my understanding, they were also treating it exclusively, considering the fact that the reason we weren't dating was because they weren't ready to date or, stuff like that. So I know how it sounds. Shut up, guys. But I was super excited for when they would turn 18 because I would do all the jokes. Like, oh my god, you like a minor. Oh my god. I would do all the jokes. I would be laughing and just laughing, but I never got to do the jokes. So knowing that they actually genuinely worried about that, which I don't know if in Japan this is a thing, but I know here in some states in America, there is a thing as the Romeo and Juliet laws, which is if you were dating the person before one of you turned into like an adult, right? Like as you two were still minors, right? And the year gap is just 2 years. Max is 2 years, right? Um, y'all are good. Y'all are good. Like legally, you can't really get into trouble, right? In certain aspects. In certain aspects. There is certain aspects that you can get into trouble, but for the most part, you can't get into trouble for dating the person. Um, right? Those are tricky. It's something that I haven't looked into in a long time. I remember the first time I looked into it was because I was a younger person dating someone who was older than me, and we did not fit the Romeo and Juliet laws. That's all I'm gonna say. Um, we did not at all. There was just one complication. Anyways, but yeah, this was an interesting chapter. Obviously, we didn't get a lot of Izuku. Is just I think the biggest part that is that one story, and then obviously we get the murder, which I remember when I first read this, it reminded me of a scene that I really wanted to do, and it inspired me. Not reminded me, it inspired me. Now it reminds me because this is the inspiration for it. But I have an OC who's a detective, and they date a criminal in roleplay, right? They date a criminal in roleplay. It changes from universe to universe, but for the most part, it's always a criminal. And it's hilarious because the case that the detective is working on is the serial murders that the criminal does. And the moment that the detective finds out, the detective's like, "Oh shit. Well, tell me when you commit a crime. I kind of want to see it firsthand. I really like your crimes. Like, I'm a big fan." Because she's just a morally gray character. In the sense where, like, look, if she loves a person enough, she will turn a blind eye to murder. Alright? In fact, she would murder. She would cover up the crime with you. I love Rena. Okay, but as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.